Around 1 in every 100 people on the planet is now a refugee. The number of people forced to flee their homes is the highest ever recorded. In many European countries, right-wing parties have recently risen to prominence on an anti-immigration platform. And America, once a leader in refugee resettlement, has more than halved the amount it receives under President Trump.
Keep these foreign terrorists from entering our country in the first place.
The second half of the 20th century was defined by bringing down walls, and the danger is that the first half of the 21st century is defined by the building of walls.
David Miliband is a former British Foreign Secretary and head of a global humanitarian charity. He is also the son of refugees who fled the Nazis and came to Britain.
The refugee crisis matters to me because my dad came here as a refugee in 1940. My mum came here as a 12-year-old girl, and I know that if the UK had not admitted them as refugees in the 1940s, then I wouldn't be here today.
Currently, there are 65 million people who have been forced to flee their homes, and over 20 million their countries.
Solving the refugee crisis is as much about our values and what the West stands for as it is for the future lives of the refugees on the receiving end.
Here are Mr. Miliband's ideas for tackling the global refugee crisis.
Refugees are displaced for a long time, so they need the chance to work, to give them dignity, to allow them to contribute to the local economy and society.
Refugee status is supposed to be temporary, yet around half of the world's refugees are displaced for more than 10 years. During this time, the majority don't have the right to work. But one country has taken pioneering steps to integrate refugees.
Uganda has made a decision that it will allow refugees to work. In Kampala, the capital, all but a tiny number of refugees were off humanitarian assistance completely because they were supporting themselves through work.
This example deserves praise, admiration from the whole of the international community.
Education is a lifeline, not a luxury, and half of all the world's refugees are kids.
3.5 million child refugees don't go to school. This is bad for them, and it's bad for their country of origin, if and when they return home. Most of the world's refugees are hosted by poor and middle-income countries.
The top 10 refugee hosting countries account for only 2.5% of global income. I think it's very important that the responsibility of Western countries is about aid to support those countries that are hosting refugees.
Although some Western countries have taken in large numbers of refugees, few refugees receive long-term resettlement packages. Of the 22.5 million who have fled their countries, less than 1% have been resettled in the West.
Very few refugees make it to the richer parts of the world, fundamentally because those countries are closing the doors to them. Traditionally, the US has taken about 90,000 refugees a year. President Trump promised 45,000. In fact, he's on track to deliver only 21,000 refugee resettlement places.
The number of refugees resettled elsewhere in the rich world is small.
I want people to believe that the refugee crisis is manageable, not insoluble, because the policy solutions are there. This is a global crisis, not just a Middle Eastern crisis, and it needs a genuinely global solution.